With that, I will have John doing the formal presentations of our presenters. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Fabio. Again, my name is John Pacheco, and I'm the president of the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Minnesota. It's the Chamber's vision to contribute to the growth and economic prosperity of Latinos in Minnesota. We accomplish our vision by bringing together business, government, corporations, and the community for economic growth and prosperity of all Latinos living in Minnesota. Today, we are partnering with Minnesota Department of Administration and presenting a series of webinars on contracting with government entities. The primary objective of the webinars is to provide you with clear information on the steps you can take to become a successful contractor with federal, state, and local governments. This is the third of a three-part series. The first was on orientation to the State Procurement Technical Assistance Center, the PTAC as it's known. The second was understanding state contracting, and that brings us today, our third and the final in the series of three. And today we are focusing on exploring federal government contracting. Co-leading this webinar are representatives from the Minnesota Procurement Technical Center and the Small Business Administration. I'll just remind you, at the end of this, we will record this. We're recording all three sessions, and they will be on our website at www.latinochambermn.com. So if you missed a few things, or if you missed the previous one, you go there and you'll have it. We're also in the process of developing the same presentations in Spanish. So stay tuned, check out the Latino Chamber's website. So without further ado, our presenters today are Bob Crowther, representing PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and Sean McCleary, representing the Small Business Administration. So first, Bob, you're up.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you for inviting us to this workshop. We have a lot of information to go over within a very short period of time, but I thought before we get too far into this, I'll give a little bit of my background information. I am come to the PTAC, with the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, after a long career in the federal government, 37 plus years. Most of those years was as a senior contracting officer. I spent some time, about a year and a half, as an interim branch chief for the USDA Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, which is really part of their overall marketing and regulatory programs. So during that process and during that time, not only as a senior level contracting officer, I spent 7 or 8 years as a national policy liaison, reporting to the Source Selection Authority, or the head of the contracting activity for that agency, which was merely more than a procurement policy liaison between the Department of Agriculture and actually the field offices within that particular branch of agriculture. I am a certified project manager, a certified federal contracts manager, as well as a senior fellow from the Council on Excellence in Government out of Washington, D.C. So one of the skill sets that I have, and what every one of our PTAC counselors do in bringing back a little bit of a perspective, is I can give an inside the government look in guiding small businesses to meet some of their overall goals and objectives. I have an awful lot of material here today to go through. I'm going to go through the agenda here in just a moment, but I want to mention I could very easily have divided this into two separate sessions and talking about, first of all, how do you find these opportunities within the government, and then some of the specifics in the thinking process of what goes into source selection in the government and why you see some of these things. So anyways, briefly, what we're going to be going through here today is we're going to talk about I'm going to give an overview of the PTAC and the PTAC services. That we'll talk about some of the similarities and differences that you see between state and local government as well as federal, and really make things quite confusing if you're not familiar with those. We'll talk about that more. We'll talk about the government marketplace in general, but primarily with the focus on the federal and the Defense Department. We're going to get into some of the things that I think you'll probably be most interested in, is how to find the opportunities, the registration requirements, and really information that's going to help you understand where you fit into the government marketplace, whether that's as a prime contractor or that of being a subcontractor. Once we finish up with that and what I call the second part of the presentation, then we're going to get into some of the meat of things. And this kind of see what some of the thinking is that goes on behind the scene by the federal buyers, if you will, in implementing some of the different authorities, the policies, procedures, and compliance, things such as required sources of supply and considerations that have to be made before it even goes out into the market for competitive proposals. So then on the next here, I go into it. The things, I got a lot of information here. What my intent is we may not be able to cover a lot of this in the depth that perhaps we would like, but I want to give you enough overview of that, and you'll have the slides and the resources that you can refer to later. And always, the PTAC does provide a service where you can contact the PTAC counselor, and we'll be glad to work with you on all these different things. But contract methodologies, types, qualifications, we'll talk about the cybersecurity, and really some of the key aspects of what you know to be successful in the federal government marketplace. And at that point, I will turn it over to Sean, where he can talk about the SBA and some of those different small business programs and certifications. The Procurement Technical Assistance Center, as you know, is part of a national program referred to as the PTAC program. And what you're going to find with those is that there's a PTAC that's located pretty much in every state, Puerto Rico, even special ones they have across the country for Native American and various ones. They're operating under a grant that's funded by the Department of Defense, the Defense Logistics Agency, and usually through matching funds, a cooperative agreement is negotiated as a host agency with either a college or university, a nonprofit organization, or as the case here within the state of Minnesota, the state of Minnesota's Department of Administration we are now a part of. We have a presence, just here briefly, you can take a look at where we're at. Mark Cooper and I cover the Twin Cities area. And then of course we have the other names and contacts, and that information is available on our website. I think one of the key things here when I was talking about my background, I retired after 37 years, so I'm available on a part-time basis. And Mark is full-time, but between the two of us, we pretty well have that covered in this particular area. What our services are is we work with you one-on-one, and we provide a lot of different information, and not only providing you with the different registrations and certifications in order to do business with the government, but we also provide assistance in either obtaining or understanding or interpreting federal or military specifications, drawings, and some of the unique requirements you may find in doing business with the federal government. One of the things that I pride myself on, and especially with my background in project management and also with the Council for Excellence in Government, which is focused on strategic visions and developing strategies, is trying to help you assess where your baseline is, where you are today, and work on strategic marketing techniques on not only finding opportunities, but to help you build your capacity and take your business in phases up to reach your vision and overall vision in contracting with the government. And we're not lawyers. We are indeed advisors. I can't write a proposal with you or anything like that, but what I can do and what we can do is we can work with you to make sure that you understand the solicitation, what it's asking for, and give you good advisory tips on proposal preparation, understanding some of the requirements in pre-award, and even after you get the contract award on post-award assistance. I've mentioned before with regard to subcontracts, sometimes you might find your role as that of a subcontractor, but we will help you with trying to determine that positioning, who those individuals are to the best of our ability, and help you build those types of relationships. And a lot of this, of course, is a process. We look at spend data and procurement histories, a number of different types of things. And as you probably have already read, that we have numerous training and websites, workshops that are free, and you can locate those on our website. One of the things here, electronic bid match system, we're going to talk about a little bit more here in a few minutes, but Overall, as a PTAC, our vision is very similar. It's to try to help stimulate small business growth, job creation, the Minnesota economy as a whole. We help Minnesota businesses like you find your opportunities in the government marketplace and really try to work with you, position you to succeed in that effort. And most importantly of all, I think we're one of the best kept secrets in the state here is our service is free to you as long as we have active meetings and stuff. There's no cost involved. So one of the things, let's get started here a little bit. I think one of the things, even though we're going to be focusing on federal government, is to really know and understand that there's a lot of variations, similarities between federal, state, local government that can be very confusing to somebody that's not familiar with doing business with the government. With that being said, it's very important that you know, if you're dealing with the state of Minnesota, the rules of the competition. They operate off from a Minnesota statute. The federal government has what they call the federal acquisition regulations, which I'll be talking about. A lot of city and county governments have their city ordinances in addition to Minnesota statutes and things that they use. The point being on here is that contract types, methodologies, competition thresholds, emphasis on diversity and disparity, bidding processes, all these things that you see outlined on here, including contractor qualification criteria and even the source selection evaluation criteria, may vary depending on the type of government that you're actually working with. And with PTAC, we will work with you to try to help you build that roadmap, whether your target market is federal, state, or local government. The federal, in the state of Minnesota alone, there's various types of federal and statewide certification programs that are different for the different levels of the government. We will help you learn and understand those, as well as try to help you qualify for those that you qualify for and understand those that you don't, because the one important thing that you need to recognize is whether you qualify or not, your competition might. But there's a lot of different rules and regs. There's really too much to do and cover right here. So I do want to mention here this link. If you were to click on there and wanted information on of any state, local government, this is a good link to go to get that information. So for today, we're going to be focusing on the federal government place, and we're going to start out here by talking a little bit about what's involved with the government. I went and ran a report here prior to the meeting using one of the federal databases called USA Spend, usaspending.gov. And what I did, and I put on this particular slide, is just a very high-level summary of the top 10 departments of the federal government and what their spending is. And this is based from, I notice I don't see on my slide here, but it was based on 2018, fiscal year 2018 numbers. And you can see just within the top 5 here, between the Department of Defense and the various military, energy, veteran affairs, Homeland Securities on there, Minnesota share alone, they awarded 182,000 plus federal contracts totaling over $133 billion. That's really quite a bit of money when you think about those things, and potential opportunities out there to your businesses. One of the slides I put up for the sake of example, because a lot of times we don't talk and promote this a lot. I just want to kind of concentrate a little bit on the Defense Department. As you can see from the various slides, there's a number of different types of things they get involved with, and the different locations: Philadelphia for troop support, aviation out of Richmond, Virginia, and even Columbus with their land and maritime. So even small companies that do machine parts or services, whatever it may be, usually somewhere within those supply chains. If it's not in the Defense Department, the federal government, again, even state or local government. But I did want to provide this information to your attention and give you that. Okay, so finding opportunities, what's really important? And I like to use this acquisition pyramid as a guide. And one of the things you really have to ask yourself as you're entering the government marketplace, and in this case, the federal one, is what currently is in place. And you'll notice at the top of the pyramid, we're talking about types of contracts. You talk about the agency indemnity delivery vehicles, or blanket purchase arrangements or option year contracts. And these are all contract awards that are currently in place within those agencies. They may even have options that's going to extend the period of performance between 2 or 3, maybe up to 5 years. And so timing is everything. And so it's important through your process is that we become familiar with some of these agencies as to what they have currently in place and when these contracts might be expiring. Another thing is in the federal government, they have what they call their required sources of supply, which I will be talking a little bit more later in the second half. But some examples of some of these special programs is UNICOR, which is nothing more than the federal prison industries. But keep in mind, when I talk about similarities and differences, MNCOR, the Minnesota Correctional Facilities, is also a special program that's available on some of the state type procurements. Ability One is merely something referred to as the Javits-Wagner-O'Day Act, which promotes business to the national industry of the blind or the national industry for severely handicapped. These are what they call required sources of supply if the government can get their needs met in these areas. UNICOR, for example, or the federal prison industries, is a remarkable source just for federal prison, within the federal prison for office furniture and systems furniture. They make some really excellent stuff. Another one for consideration is these government federal supply schedules or blanket purchase arrangements, basic ordering agreements. This is all part of the General Services Administration federal supply program, which again, I'll be talking about that more later. And then when we get into the open market, they also have certain types of agency contracts, but also purchase cards and what they call definitive contracts, where they may have just issued something within the last year. But finding opportunities can be somewhat challenging if there has been a recent award that's been made. Okay, get this to advance, here we go. All right, so finding opportunities, I put together some information here. For example, anything that's $25,000 or more, and this is looking at the total value of the buy and the contract, I'm going to say in this, and that's including options, option years. As long as the total value is $25,000 or more, they will put a synopsis, the buyers will put a synopsis in beta.sam.gov. So that's a place where you can find opportunities there. There's another link here to a database where some agencies have worked out cooperative agreements and they've competed for and negotiated multiple award agencies. And if you were to go on that website, you could see a listing of those particular contracts that are currently in place and the agencies that are authorized to use this. $15,000 to $25,000, again, that's under the advertising threshold, are somewhat of a hidden market because you're going to only find this type of information from viewing those agency websites, or if you were to visit one of the offices, you can learn about that. But if you were to go in and type in the Department of Commerce or Fish and Wildlife Service or one of the federal agencies, oftentimes on their websites, you can get a listing of some of the current procurement actions that they're working on. Anything that's less than $25,000, I consider a hidden market. Some of that, of course, is within the Defense Information Bid Board system. Micro purchase threshold, which was just recently raised from $5,000 to $10,000 as a result of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2018, but anything under $10,000, we'll talk a little bit more about that. I mentioned these mandatory sources. We'll get into that as well as the GSA supply schedules. Okay. Also, subcontracting opportunities. You'll see a couple good links here from Subnet, which is part of the SBA site, and this one here is opportunities through the Defense Department. And what I mentioned before with bid match, if the opportunity don't knock, we need to try to do our own building a door to try to find these opportunities. So one of the things, again, I mentioned supply chain. Keep in mind as to whether or not you're a service provider, raw materials, components, manufacturers, whatever you are, and look at a big project like the US Bank Stadium. You might just do architecture and engineering. I have a company that does that particular thing. we found out about a third or fourth tier subcontractor, and they were able to do architectural design work and sheet metal in one of the parking ramps. So keep in mind, so sometimes it's not necessarily marketing directly to the agency, but it's trying to find out what the agency needs are, what projects they're working on, and figuring out how to really break this down to see where you fit into that supply chain. I think I missed a slide here. Did I not bid match? Okay, maybe I got them out of order. One of the other things we talk about this process and tools to use is the Federal Procurement Data System, new generation. I've already mentioned USA spending. And on these GSA contracts, again, I'll be talking more, there's also what they call the sales query reports. But if you were to use each of these tools, for example, and capture some of those information, one of the strategies that I like to use is the pie charts, because you can chart spending to know the agencies that might be spending money for the type of product or service that you have to offer. The next area where we talk about forecasts is basically the information that they're forecasting. So a lot of times that goes to try to get their funding and their budgets approved, but you can find out what their thoughts are, what they're anticipating for products and service in the next fiscal year. A lot of that's based on historical information again, but sometimes it's just basically project managers putting forth the information of what they need to manage their programs. There's never any guarantee in any of those types of things, because a lot of that really does depend on the budget. And often we hear on the news when Congress is negotiating and they're talking about certain types of cuts, and it takes a while anyways, before they actually do sign the budget and find out just exactly what's been funded to the year going forward. But if you were to fund the sales data along with some of that forecast data, you can really start to see through this process how target agencies to market to, as well as is going to emerge and help you establish that target market, as well as trying to find out who's currently occupying the space that you're trying to enter, and try to help learn from this and position yourself as a business. The Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization Directors and Interagency Council, this link will provide a lot of that information so that you know who the small business, the minority representatives are in each of those respective areas. And again, all this information I talk about is so much information. I realize that. This is where the advisory assistance really comes in, as we work with you one-on-one to understand this, navigate this, and help you reach some of your goals. Here we're going to talk about the bid match, which I referred to later. Again, this is a free service. It comes in the form of a daily email. It's not foolproof. It doesn't eliminate web surfing, but what it is that it's a profile that the PTAC can set up to you that's tailored specifically to your business, your goals, your mission. It's based on keywords unique to your business or brief search phrases. It also would include your national, your NAICS code, which is your North American Industrial Class Code, used to determine small business size by definition, or your federal supply category or product service codes. And again, those types of things, if you don't know those, will help you break that down. We filter it geographically, either by region, state, or country. Again, it's tailored to you, but it's going to pull data from over 1,500 plus federal, state, and local government websites nationwide if we did a nationwide search. And they all come in the form of an email directly to you in your mailbox. And it looks like this. Here's one that I took out of mine from back last September. You'll get this. It says State of Minnesota, my bid match. And then on the next page, I opened that up and had several of them this day. For me, for the sake of training, I just look at what's happening within the state of Minnesota as what's represented by these keywords. But you can see right here, you click on this link, it'll take you right to the source of that information if it's available, or it'll give you the information you can do to try to help locate those particular opportunities. One thing that's really nice and to keep in mind from a historical standpoint, you can see here is this particular one for light fixtures is an opportunity. But anytime the federal government advertises in Beta SAM, anything that they award has to also be posted in Beta SAM. BidMatch will pull all of that out for you. You can see here this day, they also had other additional information from the state of Minnesota. Finance and Commerce, as well as the City of St. Paul and Olmsted County. So as these opportunities are advertised, keeping in mind these advertised thresholds, this information would be coming in a daily email. And to receive this, this is something that we provide free to our active PTAC clients. So as long as we have meetings at least 30 minutes to an hour every 4 to 6 months, you're using this, you're seeing the benefit of it, that service is free for you. So getting started in the federal government, it's important to recognize here these types of things. You do need to have your business registered with the Minnesota Secretary of State's business office. Next, you're going to need to obtain a Dun & Bradstreet or a DUNS number. This is going through change. In the near future, this is going to be changing over to a one that they're going to have an acronym of a SAMI number. It stands for something different, but Dun & Bradstreet lost the contract to Ernst and Brown. I want to say what it is. I can't think of the name offhand, but at this point in time, it's still Dun & Bradstreet, but they will assign you a number. It's important that when you go through there, you don't pay it. It's a free service. It doesn't cost you any money. Although companies will try to contact you to sell you things, you don't need to pay for anything. But it's important when you register that your Minnesota Secretary of State's business address, as it appears in your filing, your Dun & Bradstreet number, and your IRS tax filings all represent the exact same address, name, just the way exactly the way it's registered, that it all flows. Otherwise, it'll be difficult in registering in the federal government database known as the System for Award Management. That's step 3. Once you have your DUNS number, you're registered with the state of Minnesota, you get yourself activated into SAM. That's your business registration. The next part of the puzzle there is the Small Business Administration has a search base that's used by federal buyers to locate not only small businesses, but Sean's going to be talking a little bit more about this in his segment, but I'll mention right now that the federal government mindset is small business. I believe it's 23% of the spending goals that's set there. But within small business, there's goals that are set for minority-owned small businesses, women-owned small businesses, disabled veterans, place-based like HubZone and some of these others. There are goals that are set for those. This particular database through SAM will allow you to set up a search profile, and this is used not only by federal agencies and the Defense Department, it's also used by major government primes such as the Medtronics, General Mills, Land O'Lakes, Honeywell, and many of those nationwide in order to try to meet some of those particular business goals. I've mentioned the Department of Defense. Once you're registered in SAM, they're going to be assigning you a contractor and government entity code, otherwise known as a CAGE code. And that CAGE code, you'll use that to register in the Defense Information Bid Board System, or DIBS. Once you're registered in there, you'll be able to have access to a lot of different information, including some other additional small business opportunities and subcontracting opportunities I mentioned previously. But this just increases your opportunity in bidding on federal opportunities for yourselves. To get paid, they have an invoice system that is known as the Wide Area Workflow, or the Invoice Receipt Acceptance and Property Transfer, IRAPT. I think they're going back to the Wide Area Workflow because that other name never really seemed to adapt. But at any rate, once you get a DIBS registration, and if it looks like there are opportunities with the defense and you're interested in doing business with them, I do urge you to register also in the Wide Area Workflow. And again, we can work with you on trying to help get you set up in those areas.
Bob,
all right.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? Just wanted to make sure that everybody is engaged here. And if you have any questions, please send it over using the chat option at the bottom of your screen. And just wanted to tell, it's like a time monitoring piece. So, you know, we only have a few extra minutes, and make sure that you get, everybody as a participant can get the questions in on time so we can address those at the end. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for that as a reminder, and it actually came perfectly because the first segment was what I consider to be the most important information, is to try to get this type of information out to our Latino businesses. This next part that I'm leading into here with the Office of Federal Procurement Policy is the second half. And I'm going to go through this very quickly so that I can wrap up on time. You do have the copies of the slides and that information. I will, at the very end, try to answer whatever questions you have. Anything over and above that, we'll be happy to meet with you to try to make sure that your questions are answered going forward to the best of the ability. But just to kind of see what the thinking is, what the Office of Federal Procurement Policy is a division of the Office of Management and Budget. And as you can see from looking at this, this is an organization or a part of OMB that's set up to try to oversee how spending is done within the federal government-wide. It's basically looking to try to find the best ways to promote economy, efficiency, and the effectiveness of the federal acquisition process. The council is basically consists of membership, 4 memberships. It starts out with that OMB representative, which is the council chair from that Office of Federal and Procurement Policy, as well as their associate administrator. It includes the Secretary of Defense, the administrator from NASA, as well as the administrator from GSA. It's basically a very complex set of rules, but it regulates all the different activities of the government personnel and carrying out this process. And it consists of 3 different phases, which we'll be getting into here a little bit. The overall vision of that federal acquisition system, when you really get into it here, is to result in timely delivery of a quality or best value product or service while maintaining public trust and fulfilling public policy objectives. Basically, the FAR is applicable to most agencies of the executive branch. There are some exceptions, as you can see, with the legislative and judicial branches are not required to follow the FAR, but to some extent they do, as well as some of these quasi-governmental agencies that are exempt from the FAR, such as the Postal Service, U.S. Mint, Federal Reserve Bank, FDIC, and the Federal Aviation Administration. But I do know that they still use the Beta SAM, and although they don't use all those services, I know as the Postal Service, for example, is a user fee funded more so out of federal funding. If you were to go on each of their respective websites, you can find information on doing business with them. And that's where you can see some of those differences on there. One of the other things to highlight here is the FAR is what I like to refer to as the federal government spending Bible. This is a regulatory authority. And this is what everybody, with the exceptions I just mentioned, has to follow. But what you're going to find is that each of the different agencies, the executive agencies of the government, including the Department of Defense, or with me, being with agriculture, it's called the agriculture, they have the right to supplement the FAR. Now, they can't change it, but what they can do is add some additional requirements that's unique to that department or agency that still have to be met and satisfied. And a lot of this information, you're going to think, well, how will I know that? But you'll see these supplemental references, as well as some of these federal acquisition regulation clauses, are going to flow down through the request for proposals or those solicitation packages. And then, of course, the Navy and Marine Corps acquisition regulation supplement is just one example. And there's a separate website here if you wanted to click and learn more about some of those if the need should ever arise. This type of information, we primarily will look at the what I call acquisition.gov. I think I have some screenshots of that later coming on, although the Hill Air Force Base is also a very good source of this information. It's divided into 53 parts. The first 6 parts, of course, is taking a look at some acquisition planning, acquisition matters, code of conduct, a lot of different things along those areas. The rest of the FAR is basically taking a look at all these different areas you're looking at. Micro purchase and simplified acquisition, large dollar value buys. These are all things that are based on the total estimated government estimate and the value, potential value of a contract, and as well as applicable labor laws and different things that's tied to a particular source selection. The things and natures with regard to some of the set-aside programs and the small businesses is all contained within Part 19, and the clauses are Part 52. Sean will be talking about a good portion of Part 19 in his segment. The federal acquisition regulations, just a screenshot from acquisition.gov as to what it looks like. We click on this a little bit, you can see the 53 chapters here. You can click on any one of these links. I should have probably circled that. You see it right here, I'm under the FAR clause or tab. Over here is where the supplemental agency regulations are. And there's a lot of other good tools, but it's going to be this one or this one here that you might see something in the clause. You can always look it up here if it's incorporated by reference to determine exactly what it pertains to. Here is the one on the supplemental regulations. I moved it over here. You can kind of see where some of these additional links are right here where you can just click on them and get more information. All right, let's get into it a little bit. We talked a little bit about the required sources of supply. That's FAR Part 8. The obvious ones is making sure you don't already have these extra supplies sitting in a closet someplace or on agency inventories. Maybe the regional office in the South might have something that they're no longer using that the upper Midwest will be able to use. Of course, this is where we need to do that or checking to see what other agencies have before they ever go out on spending. But then, as what's outlined in the FAR Part 8, the federal prison industries is what I mentioned to you, which is the Unicor, the Javits Wagner O'Day Ability One program, which puts a lot of emphasis on doing business with the national industry of the blind or severely handicapped, as well as the GSA Defense Logistics Agency stock inventory schedule contracts, and then of course that's open competition. The general administration, we'll talk about that for a little bit, is divided into two divisions, the Federal Acquisition Service as well as the Public Building Service. One of the emphasis of GSA puts emphasis on going with commercial off-the-shelf products and services. Like I said, it's a preferred source of supply. It's not necessarily a mandatory source, but you can see it works very much like Amazon, where a lot of the pricing, volume discounts, terms and conditions are pre-negotiated. If it's a service that your company provides, of course, those pre-established hourly rates or unit prices are then task orders or delivery orders are issued against these contracts, and that's how they're used. Here's with the Public Building Service. So if you're a construction company or one that does any type of service contract, including alterations and repairs to the government, the GSA Public Building Service is where all the federal buildings are and the different types of buildings within the major metropolitan areas of the Twin Cities. You have service needs sometimes for lawn services as well as any other type of service that you can think of. But the other takeaway that I want you to kind of keep in mind is that there's also real estate and space that's used by federal agencies and the Defense Department outside the metropolitan area, where perhaps the lessors own the property and they have a need for some of these products or services too. So again, a part of the process is, if you're in this area, is to see what might be available through GSA and through some of the other tools that we talked about, but don't rule out some of the other things with the federal agencies. I know with the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service of USDA that I worked for in the Twin Cities area, they have a big leasing office that works on negotiating office space for those offices. There are several of them in Minnesota, but all over the country outside of the metropolitan areas. These are a lot of links of ones where if you were to go onto the Public Building Service website, you can click on any of these links to try to get additional information on products or services or how to do business with them. This is one where it's really timing. You need to make sure that you have the capacity to be able to meet the demand of the government, and something that PTAC and our counselors will work with you to help you understand what the requirements are to be a GSA contractor and the expectations, and help you prepare for that at the appropriate time in your business plan. Okay, next here, when we talk about this, one of the key elements of government procurements is it relies on market research. This is part 10 of the FAR. And this is where they basically, where a lot of the pre-planning goes through to not only determine whether or not, well, like what it says, determine whether or not their source is available to satisfy agency needs. Back in 1985 or 86, as part of the Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act, they did a big change in the federal government. And they put more of an emphasis on going with commercial items and services versus the old days of putting together what they call design specifications. And oftentimes that made the buys much more complex than what they really needed to be. But with the emphasis going on commercial products and services to meet an agency need, or the next question, of course, that within the government, it would say is that, okay, there's nothing on the commercial marketplace that's going to meet their needs, but could they be modified slightly to meet the agency requirements? Or could the agency requirements to be modified slightly in order to meet what's available in the commercial marketplace? This is where the emphasis is, because it allows for pricing and production lead time and all these things based on industry standards. It can establish a lot of more economical buys, and buying with economic order quantities, warranty, services, maintenance are all pretty standard way of doing business. It also kind of minimizes the risk to the government. You're going to see on some of these later slides is that sometimes these buying and source selection decisions really are based on risk, because really as the dollar threshold goes up, so does the complexity. But market research is the key. Sometimes in the early planning stages, they'll go through this to try to get an idea as to how much money they need to request in those procurement forecasts, or when they're trying to get their budget money for, say, fiscal year 21 or 22. That market research will give them an idea as to what your costs are. And as a buyers, they'll sometimes contact 6, 7 companies just to get an idea as to what they're up against. What's the standard delivery time and timeline? Things that's going to help them determine the content to put within a statement of work or performance work statement, as well as, again, estimate the government price and know what's a reasonable expectation of what that contract award could be. And we talk about that. It's also considering such things as sole source, not sole source, but set aside considerations, which Sean will be getting into in more depth. But again, it's always the mindset of small business set aside. And back in my role when I served as a competition advocate for USDA, this is one where we really held the buyers responsible for me to see that documentation, especially when they were looking to award on an unrestricted basis and give the large business the opportunity to compete. We wanted to know what considerations and how many minority-owned small businesses or woman-owned small businesses were out there in that marketplace that could potentially submit an offer. Okay, the competition thresholds in the federal government, again, state and local are different. The micro-purchase threshold was just raised to $10,000 with the exceptions of service and construction, which you'll know with the Service Contract Act is a minimum wage requirement that's applicable to services. I'll point out here is that in the federal government, they use the minimum wage standards, wage determinations from the U.S. Department of Labor. Minnesota has their own Minnesota Department of Labor, and their wage rates may change slightly on state contracts, state and local contracts. Davis-Bacon is for construction contracts, anything $2,000 or more. It establishes the minimum wage requirements. You can say, well, what does this mean to me? I don't, and what it basically means is that if you're bidding on a federal or defense contract and it involves any of these service or labor categories, you have to pay your employees those minimum wages plus fringe benefits in order to be compliant with the contract requirements. So that's, this is the micro purchase less than $10,000, the $10,000 to $250,000, which it will cover into Part 13 in a little more detail, has just been raised from $150,000 to $250,000. That figure is $7 million for commercial products and services under simplified acquisition. A formal contract then would be the $250,000 or more, or $7 million or more on the commercial items. And you can see with commercial item type of things, when we get into it, they could use any part of these sealed bids or negotiated procurements or simplified thresholds when they're buying out of this commercial item thing. I know that rambling here is going to kind of a little bit confusing. I'm expecting there's going to be questions on this going forward, but that's what we're here to do. We'll break it down and we'll work with you.
Yeah, Bob, just to remind you, we have just 5 more minutes to go before questions, and we'll go from there.
I'm going to hit the high points. Again, you have these things. Again, this is risk driven. In the federal government, they're going to push toward a fixed price contract because that's going to lower the risk to the buying activity. This is the government buyers. So you can read up on that more. You will see a lot of cost reimbursement contracts. A lot of that, again, is going to depend on FAR Part 16, which is your contract type, which kind of goes into the definition of the cost reimbursement, different types of cost reimbursement as well as the other. Part 12 is just a breakdown of commercial products. We talked about a lot of this stuff already. I'm going to skip ahead here with the simplified acquisition threshold. Again, these are all kind of repeats. The one thing that I will promote on here is that it's going to promote the competition to the maximal extent practical, but the exceptions on this within these thresholds, they can use oral quotations if necessary. It doesn't have to be always the paper proposal, but you'll see oftentimes they will put out a request for quotation or sometimes even a request for proposal on a more complex one. There's also an increased emphasis on use of the government Visa card for commercial purposes. Since I have 10 minutes, I'm going to really skip ahead here. The IFB is sealed bidding. I'm going to say I will go ahead and then I'll come back if I have time. This is one on negotiated. It talks about the different kinds here where you have to get into more detailed proposal, quality assurance, experience, cost and price source selection authority, all these different things. And it's usually based on best value and trade-off considerations of the lowest technically acceptable proposal. There's some other options on there. A lot of this is solicitation specific. This is very important. Unlike local government, in the federal government, you have to have adequate financial resources or the ability to obtain them. The government does not provide partial or advance payments. They will provide partial payments for standalone deliverable benefits as outlined in the solicitation. But generally speaking, its inspection and acceptance will authorize payment and it's net 30 days thereafter. But Part 19 are the contractor qualifications, and this is what the buyers use when they're to make their decisions on whether or not the apparent award winner is suitable for the actual contract award. This is just the most important elements. There's a little bit further breakdown. But one thing as a small business, I believe Sean may be talking about this, is that if the contractor has you selected as the apparent award winner, but they find some concern whether or not you have the ability to finance the cash flow for the performance of the contract, pay wages or whatever that may be, they may make a determination that you're non-responsible and have to refer that over to the SBA for consideration for certificate of competency. And if they will work with you to try to get you any way they can to give the contracting officer the assurances that you can perform, and will issue that when necessary. Cybersecurity is very important. Stay tuned to that. We'll be doing a separate training on that, but this is something that's driven by the Department of Defense. It's going to be implemented before the end of this calendar year. 5 different levels of cybersecurity best practices. I'm working on a presentation on that now, and we should have that available for a workshop here coming up soon. In the meantime, we will be working with you as PTAC counselors to help you meet those requirements as appropriate. Okay, so in wrapping up, one of the things you have to try to keep in mind is that as you're entering the government market space, there's businesses that are already there. And so you need to really do this process using these tools available to try to get answers to these key questions. What does the government buy, or do they buy what you sell? How do they go about it? From the spend data, who is their target agency? Where are you going to apply your resources? And who are the top contractors in your area that might be giving you the most difficulty? Because one of the things that you want to try to do is not only identify your differentiators, but start thinking about what your value proposition is and should select you for perhaps who they might be using previously to do this work. In other words, who's occupying the space in the marketplace that you're trying to enter. Think about teaming opportunities, partnering with both, especially that's a good way to get experience, and especially if you don't have the sufficient capacity to meet the contractor expectations. Again, on this final page, this is our PTAC website. There's a link to it up on top. Down below that, you can't see this, but if you go onto our page, there's a nice YouTube video that talks about our services. If you are interested in meeting with me or any one of the PTAC counselors, you do need to click on this link and register your business as a new client registration. They will invite you to that PTAC orientation session and assign you to a counselor, and who will reach out to you to try to get you on that calendar. With that being said, I believe that is my last one, and we can hand it over to Sean here. And let me see how to do that. I'll stop share.
Hi, Bob.
Yep.
If we have a few minutes left here before we pass it over to Sean, and we just have a couple of questions, if you wouldn't mind.
No.
We have a question from Liz. Well, we have two questions actually, and she says, it seems many of the services needed are product or labor based. What is your sense of the need for marketing materials or specific types of advertising campaigns? For example, the need to inform stakeholders of an impending construction project in their area or neighborhoods. This may be state options, but anything on the federal agency level you can speak to anecdotally?
Well, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I was going to say there really is a need for almost everything, but I think a lot of this is going to go through the process to see what they've done in the past historically. And it's going to be pretty much the same thing. But I do know that there's a lot of companies that are involved with federal contracts as well as state and local that work on advertising and marketing and helping businesses to promote themselves to whomever their target market may be. Does that answer that question?
Liz will let us know. And then she said, yes, that answers the question. And then also, how does she find contractors in her area?
That's basically using some of the tools that I've talked about. You can break those down by state, and you just can break it down. It's how you sort that information. And Fed BizOps is might be able to be tailored toward a certain market if need be to try to help find those. We can work with you on that.
Great, thank you so much, Bob. Thanks, you did a great job explaining the process. It's very complicated and detailed, and we certainly know everyone will get a lot of value out of it. For those participants that are here, we'll move on to part 2 with Sean. And Sean, go ahead and take it away.
Certainly, and let me just share my presentation here real quickly. And hopefully everybody is seeing this. How's it looking, Grace?
It looks good.
Okay, excellent. So we're going just a little bit further into the federal government contracting environment. We're going to talk more about certifications and what they might mean. And when I say certifications, I'm talking about small business, socioeconomic groups, things like that. So first off, my name is Sean McClary. I'm with the U.S. Small Business Administration. So we're a federal agency of the executive branch of the U.S. government. So I'm the government employee in the room here today. You may know SBA, particularly in the news recently from lending programs, our small business loans. Recently, our emergency loans have been a big talking point and subject. But we also do business counseling and training, as well as get involved with government contracting through our small business programs in disaster assistance, like I mentioned. We have a national webpage, sba.gov, which is a very useful page, pretty easy to navigate. The tabs are labeled well. And for anybody that has an interest, we do have the entire page, I believe, is available in Spanish content as well. Most of our resource guides are in multiple languages as well. So kind of a nice feature. We've also got our Minnesota webpage, which is sba.gov/MN. Here you're going to find local news and events regarding small business opportunities, contracting, lending, any type of subject matter that's useful to you as a small business owner in Minnesota. You can also find our resource guide there. So today I'm going to talk about our federal small business goals, some policies, and then I'll get into the programs, the contracting programs and eligibility and benefits and kind of the point behind them. So one thing you've probably already noticed is that we are full of acronyms. Everybody has an abbreviation for something, and we have quite a few. And one thing you're going to notice in contracting and government contracting is different government agencies might have the same acronym that mean totally different things. So anytime you come across an acronym and you're just not sure what it means, just ask to verify or clarify what it is. I'll try to use the full names of the programs that I'm talking about today. So the first thing to mention, and Bob kind of talked about this briefly, is the federal government has prime contracting small business goals. And what that means is when the federal government has money to spend and they need jobs done, a percentage of that work needs to go to small businesses. The contracts need to go to small businesses. So at the federal level, it's a 23% goal. I've got some of the numbers up here from 2017. You can see that we've made about 23.88% in 2017, and that includes all of the other categories as well. So it gives you a general idea what that looks like. 8A and small disadvantaged business, which is typically minority owned or economically disadvantaged. And we have a 5% goal, and we usually sit around 9% for that one as far as what we get. Woman-owned small business is a 5% goal. We've only hit that once in 2015. Right now we're at about 4.8. Hub zone small business is a 3% goal, and service disabled veteran-owned small business, SDVOSB, is a 3% goal. We do pretty well on the service disabled veteran, but we've never hit the hub zone goal either. Dollar-wise, what that looks like is kind of like this. 2017, the total spend that goes towards these goals is $442 billion. So of that, of those contracting requirements, 106 billion went to small businesses, 40 billion to small disadvantaged, woman-owned small business saw about 20 billion, and HubZone saw 7 billion. Service disabled veteran was also right around 18 billion. So one of the ways, the big question is, how do we reach these goals, right? And probably the most obvious way is that we set aside contracts. And Bob mentioned this, but what it basically is we reserve bidding opportunities to just small businesses within a certain either socioeconomic group or category. So in this case, what we can do is we can set aside a contract for a small business, for 8A business development participants, which we'll talk about, Hub Zone, service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, woman-owned small business, and economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. And simply what that means is just that competition is limited to just that group. So if you're bidding on providing some highway work for the Department of Transportation or something like that, you don't have to go up against some giant multinational construction company. It's, maybe they're going to reserve it to small businesses or veteran-owned small businesses, something along those lines. Another way we reach these goals is through our subcontracting requirements. And this is through our prime contractors or our large government contractors, like think Mortenson Construction or Medtronic, Cargill. We have a lot of these prime contractors in Minnesota, so it's a good market for all of you to consider. But when they have a large government contract, over 700,000 or 1.5 million for construction, then they have to submit a subcontracting plan to the SBA. And within that subcontracting plan, they have very similar goals to what we have at the federal level. Additionally, they have goals for veteran-owned small business instead of just service disabled veteran-owned small business. So that's kind of a nice option. Key things to remember here is each one of these prime contractors they also have to designate a small business liaison officer. And the SBLO, that's the person that is going to be the small business lead. They're looking for vendors like yourselves. They're basically helping to diversify their spend and identify companies that can help them perform their contracts. So you'll meet them at different events throughout the year. Sometimes if you register on one of the prime contractors' websites as a vendor, that person may be the one that will reach out to you. So within all these set-aside opportunities, there's a couple of things to think about. And Bob talked about SAM already, the System for Award Management. But we've got self-certification, full certifications, and then of course your SAM registration. So if you want to do business with the federal government, you have to be registered in SAM. Additionally, if you want to count towards those prime contractor goals, you have to be registered in SAM. Within there, we have different representations and certifications that you can make. As far as if you're small, you're going to list your revenues and number of employees, so it will determine if you're small for the type of industry that you're in. You will be able to assert or self-certify, some of us say self-certify, that you are a small disadvantaged business or a woman-owned small business or veteran-owned small business, or of course service-disabled veteran-owned small business. So those are all basically self-certifications within SAM, and we'll get into the differences a little bit later on. There are also full certifications. That would be the 8A Business Development Program, which is part of the Small Disadvantaged Business, or SDB. There is the Hub Zone program, which is historically underutilized business zone. That's a full certification. And then there's, through the VA, they actually do a verification for service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. So those are full certifications. That means you're putting together a full application, sending it to somebody. They're reviewing it, making sure that you meet all the eligibility requirements, and then they are, giving it the stamp of approval and saying you are who you say you are. And then we, if it's an SBA certification, we would then update your SAM registration. So one of the first things I recommend is that businesses go to certify.sba.gov. That's our certification website that we've been building up for the last 3 or 4 years. Within that page, there's a tool. You'll see a tab that says, Am I eligible? If you click that, you'll be able to go through a bunch of questions, answer the questions. It will give you additional information with each question, and it will tell you at the end what certifications you are likely eligible for, and then it will tell you how to pursue them. That's kind of the key right there. One thing to keep in mind if you are pursuing any of these certifications, don't forget about PTAC. We heard from Bob already from PTAC early on. They are a fantastic resource, and they will help you with this process. So to be clear, small business, SDB, or small disadvantaged business, SDVOSB, service disabled veteran-owned small business, WOSB, woman-owned small business, those are all self-certifications, mostly. 8A Business Development, Hub Zone, again, SDVOSB and WOSB are also full certifications now. So we kind of muddy the waters a little bit, and I'll get into the reason for that a little bit later on. So again, get help. You'll have my contact information as well, and people within my local district office can also help answer questions about these. So let's go into some of the more details here. Basically, one of the first things we're going to talk about is whether or not you're a small business, and this is going to be based on your industry classification code. So if you're in construction, you're going to have a specific 6-digit code that describes the type of construction you're in. And there's a size standard that says, hey, businesses under $39 million a year in revenue are considered small. And so there's different sizes depending on the type of industry. And those size standards can be found at the table at the SBA page. And it's going to be based on either a 1-year average number of employees or 5 years of average revenues. And again, you'll go through this during your self-certification. The rules around these programs, by the way, and on the size standards can be found at 13 CFR. CFR is Code of Federal Regulations 121. And these are hot links also in the presentation, or at least they should be. So if you are so inclined, the regulations are pretty straightforward. They're not too bad as far as government regulations go. Take a look and go from there. Just to give you an example, this is an older table of size standards, but it shows you some general ideas. You can see at the bottom a solar electric power generation. Let's say you built a solar power field, out in Hastings. If you have fewer than 250 employees per year, you're considered a small business. If you run a tax preparation service and you make your income is less than your revenue, is less than $20.5 million, then you're a small business. So it kind of gives you an idea of how that works. We use the size standards to determine your eligibility for our business programs. Contracting officers can use it the same way. They're going to choose, when they're putting together a contract for you to bid on, they're going to choose an industry code that is the most applicable to the work being done. So if it's a bridge construction situation, they're going to look for heavy construction, heavy highway construction. They're probably not going to advertise it as plumbing or general construction, commercial construction. So there's different ways that it will fit, and of course the different size standards will have an effect on how large a pool or group of businesses can bid on the contract. So one thing to keep in mind as you're going through this process is when you are putting in your revenues and your number of employees and stating that you're a small business, it becomes something that can be verified. If you win a bid and somebody believes that you might not be a small business, maybe they think you're partially owned by a large business, or they have reason to believe that, they can file what's called a size protest. Contracting officers can do this as well. In which case, SBA will look at the situation, and we would resolve the protest and do the research to figure out if you are in fact large or if you are small. So it's something to always keep in mind is know the rules, be informed, and get help as you need it, like from PTAC. That also goes for status protests. So if you self-certify that you are a woman-owned small business, and it turns out that maybe you're only the partial owner, somebody else can make long-term decisions for the company or something like that. That's something that can be protested as well, and that's a bad position to be in. So make sure you're aware of what the rules are around those responsibilities. So one other way we keep money flowing within these different categories is through our limitations on subcontracting. So what that means is, if you as a small business get a contract to build a bridge, I like bridges, I guess I talk about it a lot. It's expected that you're going to have subcontractors that you might have to hire for different things. Maybe when you're done, you need landscapers to go in and do a bunch of work. General construction or that sort of construction requires that you cannot subcontract more than 85% of the cost of the contract, excluding materials, to other companies that are not similarly situated. So basically, if you as a small business get this huge contract, you can't just take a cut off the top and pass it on to some other business to do all the work. It doesn't work that way. You have to perform on the contract, and that's how we kind of keep it legitimate. There are exceptions, and one of them here is it says similarly situated. So if you're a woman-owned small business and you subcontract to another woman-owned small business, that's going to count as self-performance for the contract. So that's kind of a nice thing. Opportunity for you as small businesses to build up partnerships with other small businesses that can help you complete or team up on jobs. And there's different levels. Services and supplies is typically not more than 50%. General construction is 85%, and specialty trade is 75%. So the programs, let's get right into the programs. They are 8A Business Development, which is part of Small Disadvantaged Business, or SDB. Hub Zone, I'm just going to use acronyms here, WOSB and EDWOSB, SDVOSB and VOSB, and the Mentor Protege programs. So first off, let's talk about some common elements between all of these. And again, you can find a lot of this information in SAM when you're doing your registration, or it's important when you're going through the registration to know this information. First off, there's a 51% ownership and control aspect. So if you are a small business, you're stating that you are the 51% or more owner. You control the direction of the company, you're the highest paid, you have the ability to hire and fire, all these different tests. And this also flows over into the different socioeconomic categories. So if you're a service disabled veteran-owned small business, you should be 51% or more than half, owned by service disabled veterans. And it could be more than one. It can, if you have 5 owners, if 3 of you are service disabled veterans, that would meet the standard, for example. You have to be US citizens. You must be a small business based on those small business size standards. And for a couple of programs, there's an economic disadvantage aspect that's based around net worth, total assets, and personal income. And I'll talk about this more when we get to the 8A program. Some common benefits. The first and simplest benefit is that you are listed, once you're registered in SAM at sam.gov, you're listed in the dynamic small business search. So this is basically a catalog of all the different small businesses registered in SAM. And it's something that contracting officers use to search for small businesses. They can break it down by any number of different things. They can break it down by socioeconomic group. They can break it down by industry or location. So it's a tool that they use to locate potential bidders for their contracts. Those prime contractors we talked about, like Medtronic or Mortensen, or PAR Systems, they also use this program or this database. And it's a tool that's available for you as well. So if you get a contract and you need a partner that can perform part of your contract, it's a place where you can do a search and find companies that are capable of helping you out. Of course, you become eligible for set-aside contracts depending on the program that you're in. There's a potential for sole source contracts. Exception to that is 8A, which we'll talk about. There's subcontracting opportunities, like we mentioned. As a similarly situated firm, you have more opportunity with similarly situated companies. So it's a nice reinforcement of small business networks. There's also the access to the Mentor Protege programs, which we'll talk about briefly at the end. Again, the first place to go would be the certify.sba.gov website. I'm going to go back a page here for a second. So the first program we'll talk about is the 8A Business Development Program. The application can be completed at certify.sba.gov. This program is different than the others in that it's a business development program. It's more than just a certification. As an 8A, you're basically a small disadvantaged business. That's the actual certification and goal. But this program is as long as 9 years. You can graduate early or be terminated from the program or withdraw or whatever, but you can be in it for up to 9 years. During that time, there's quite a bit of work that can be done to help your business grow. So to kind of summarize the program, it's intended for small businesses owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. That also includes American Indian tribes, Alaska Native corporations or ANCs, Native Hawaiian organizations, any tribal owned entity also fits into this. The rule book for this program is at 13 CFR. CFR is Code of Federal Regulations, again, 124. Everything's in there, and one nice thing about the CFR, it's all done in a question and answer style format, so it tends to be pretty easy to find what you're looking for right away. And I'd also like to apologize just in case in this time of people working from home, I have a dog and it's barking in the background, so I apologize for that. So the criteria for the program, there's 3 main, and then there's all those basic eligibility criteria we talked about earlier. There's the social disadvantage, economic disadvantage, and then potential for success. And we'll jump right into the social disadvantage on the next page here. So basically, this is based on your membership within a presumed groups or non-designated groups. So presumed groups include Black American, Asian Pacific American, Hispanic American, Native American, and Subcontinent Asian American. There are non-designated groups as well. So for example, if you're a woman-owned small business, you can apply for this program also, but you have to provide some evidence that shows that you faced social disadvantage in your industry or in your work, in your work or in your education or in the industry that your business is operating in. SBA will review that and basically make a decision based on the evidence. So the presumed groups, however, are automatic for this first eligibility criteria. The second eligibility is that economic disadvantage. So the first number here, and these columns got a little bit skewed, but the application, when you first apply for the program, you should have a net worth of less than $250,000. One thing to keep in mind there is that excludes the value of your business, any equity in your home, or any retirement savings that you might have that you can access without penalty. Once you're in the program, that jumps up to $750,000. Your total assets should be less than 4 million at application and under 6 million continuing. Personal income should be less than a $250,000 3-year average, and that goes up to $350,000 after you're in the program. Real quickly, for economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business, you see the note down here. SDB, small disadvantaged business, and economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business have to meet the criteria under the continuing column. So that's 750,000, 6 million, and 350,000. So keep that in mind as we go through this, the rest of the slides. Hold on one second here. So there is one thing missing here. There's another criteria that I had mentioned, which was the potential for success. And what this generally means is that you've been in business for a while. You're ready to move into government contracting. You have the past performance and the capability, the capacity to take on government contracts. And this is based on, for one thing, how long you've been in the business, your knowledge about the business or industry you're in, and whether or not you're able to finance jobs. If you have the working capital to continue. So one thing we always say about the 8A program is it's not something that you jump into right away. You kind of want to plan for it, because even though it's a 9-year program, and 9 years goes by very fast. When you get in there, you want to be ready to jump on those contracts. A lot of people get in and they might miss the first 3, 4, 5 years and not get any contracts. So be ready, work with PTAC on your capacity and your ability, and get some past performance in. Now, the big benefits of the 8A program are in sole source contracts. So this is different than the set-asides. Anything going to 8A under $4 million for goods and services or under $7 million for manufacturing should be awarded through a sole source award. That means the contracting officer sees your company and says, okay, XYZ Consulting, you have the capability to perform this project. You're in the 8A program. We would like to do a direct award with you. They talk to SBA, SBA accepts the contract, and then you negotiate it one-on-one with the contracting officer until you come to an agreement. So it's very different. You're not going through that bidding process. You're going through a negotiation process. And that's really the business development component of this. You're really taking on contracts and building your business and your knowledge through this program. There can also be set-asides in the 8A program. It's usually above those dollar thresholds at the top of the slide there. You have the ability to purchase excess government property, like from GSA services. This could be tools, desks, sometimes old vehicles. Maybe you've seen the GSA vehicle auctions. You have the ability to purchase these items at less than government cost typically. SBA also provides additional assistance and training to the firms. So we work with you over those 9 years. And you have access to things like our 7J training. Again, the program is up to 9 years long. You can only be in it once in your lifetime, and same thing with your business. So it's very restrictive on that front. You apply at certify.sba.gov. It's a long process. It can take some time. Oftentimes after you've gone through the process, you'll get a letter back stating you forgot to send 25 different things. And it sounds terrible. Just make sure you work with your PTAC counselor and work through it. And if you're able to resend the information, sometimes this process can take 6 months. They do have 90 days to make a decision, but that's after they have a full packet. So again, if this program's of interest to you, contact me directly. I work with it directly in Minnesota, so I'm your point of contact on that front. There's also opportunity for other education on what the program can do. So now we'll move into the HubZone program. We don't have, you can't apply for it at certify.sba.gov. It's still set up through one of our older programs, but we do have a checklist there that it can help you with the process. So this is our only place-based program, and it's designed to increase investment or economic opportunity in different areas that have been typically distressed, low income or high unemployment. Typically, there's 3 main types. There's rural counties, urban areas, and the external boundaries of federally recognized Indian reservations. We have a map that's very similar to Google Maps, where you can look up individual properties or addresses, and it will tell you where it's at. That's at maps.certify.sba.gov. I'll show you a couple of screenshots of what the maps look like in a moment. So for this program, you have to meet all 4 of the requirements below. Your principal office has to be in a hub zone. Your principal office is where you have the largest number of employees performing their work. 35% of your employees should reside in a hub zone, and it doesn't have to be the same hub zone. You have to be small by SBA standards, and then of course the 51% owned and controlled by U.S. citizens. So this is a general overview of the U.S. and what it looks like as far as hub zones. They're broken down by colors. With the dark blue is census tracts. So usually we have those in like urban areas are broken up that way. Larger rural areas are typically by county. Those are in red. And then the Indian land would be in the that light blue color. There are other areas on the maps. Like you can see these areas where that dot is in the center. You can see there's hashtags across there. It's just lined out. That means it used to be a hub zone, but it's been redesignated, meaning that it no longer meets the economic requirements. You know, the incomes have gone up or unemployment has gone down. So now it's basically going to graduate out of hub zone. So you'll see those pop up as well. This is a shot of the metro area, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. Statewide, you can see we have a lot of our northern counties are hub zones. We do have this area sort of south central Minnesota where there was a military reserve base that was closed. This is another type of area. Whenever an army base or military base is closed, they designate the surrounding area as a hub zone for a certain amount of time. The benefits, again, set aside contracts, the possibility of sole source, and then the big one for hub zone is that they, as a hub zone company, if you're bidding on a project that's in full and open competition, that means anybody can bid on it, and the apparent winning bidder is a large business, then you can have a 10% price preference applied to your situation. So that can have a pretty big impact. And basically what that would mean is, let's say you bid $105 on a contract, and the winning bidder, the apparent winning bidder, was a large business that bid $100. Then they'd apply that 10% price preference. Suddenly, that large business's bid was $110, and you're the lowest bidder. We've done a lot of things on the Hub Zone program. We've stabilized the map so that your area is going to be a hub zone for a minimum of 5 years before it can change, and then there's a 3-year transition period. They've added a governor designated area, so a governor can choose an area that he thinks needs the economic development and ask SBA to designate it as a hub zone. And also, if you happen to buy a building or build a building, your office or headquarters in an area that's a hub zone, even if that area turns into a non-hub zone, it grows out of it or whatever, you will still be considered a hub zone for 10 years. So they kind of guarantee that on there to help determine or help influence that long-term investment. So there's some changes to that. There's some additional ongoing changes regarding residency and the 35% rule and recertification. So if you're interested in hub zone, call me, shoot me an email, and we'll talk about it further. Again, go to that certify.sba.gov site and go through the process of determining if you're eligible, basically eligible. Here we have some more information about how to get through the process. We'll skip on from that because it's not terribly important right now. Next up is the Women-Owned Small Business Contracting Program, or WOSB, and then ED. ED is economically disadvantaged, so EDWOSB is economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, which is an even smaller group than just the woman-owned smaller business. For these, you can apply at that certify.sba.gov website. And this is where things are also a little bit complicated. So as a WOSB, woman-owned small business, you can self-certify when you register in SAM. When you do that, you count towards any government agency's prime contracting goals, that 5% goal that we talked about early on. You also count towards those prime contractors, the Cargills and Medtronics and whatnot. You count towards their subcontracting goals. So it's important that you do that. However, we have additional steps required if you want to be qualified to go after set-aside contracts. So what that means is the SBA did a disparity study years back, and they determined that there were roughly 400 plus industry groups where women were either substantially underrepresented or underrepresented. And so they determined, based on that, on how underrepresented they were, if they should have to be either woman-owned small business or economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business in order to qualify for a set-aside. So you can find the lists right on the SBA webpage. This is a hot link. So if you know what your NAICS code is and you're a woman-owned small business, go to this page. If you see your industry listed or any of your NAICS codes listed, then it may be worth your while to go after the full certification for this. If it's not listed, there's no need to go after this additional step. So basically what that means is a contracting officer can set aside a contract just for women-owned small business to bid on, only within those identified industry codes. So I hope that makes sense. But even without going through that extra step, that self-certification in SAM is still very important to your business. Basic eligibility, pretty similar as before. You have to be small, and then 51% owned and controlled by women who are U.S. citizens. And for that economically disadvantaged component, you have the net worth, total assets, and personal income test that we talked about earlier. The benefits, again, set-asides if you qualify under one of the NAICS codes that are identified where women are underrepresented. You have sole source opportunities if the contracting officer determines that it's appropriate. Federal prime contractors have their goals for women-owned small business. So remember that, don't forget that. And federal contracting officers also get credit towards their goal when awarding to WOSBs, even if it's not in that those set-aside NAICS codes. So that's all still very important. So right at this point in time, SBA doesn't currently certify. We don't really do a full certification for WOSB or EDWSB for set-asides. That's all changing. So right now, people go to that certify.sba.gov. They put in all their information and they self-certify, add a bunch of documents, and then it's up to the contracting officer to go back and verify that if they're going to do a set-aside contract to that business. That's changing to where now as a woman-owned small business, you'll make a full application on that site and SBA will review it and then do a full certification. You can also do that through a third-party certifier. Locally, the Women's Business Development Center is approved to do WOSB for Minnesota businesses. Now, the full certification, I have some dates here coming up to give you an idea. So as of October 15th, 2020, businesses competing for WOSB Federal Contracting Program set-asides will go through the free, you can either go through the free certified.sba.gov website and do your full certification, or you can have that third-party group do it. The current self-certification process will stay in effect until October 15th. After that, though, they have to be set up in that full certified system. The dates to think about were past May here. So July 15th, which is right around the corner. If you are currently a woman-owned small business and you're already in certified.sba.gov, you should have received a notice, but you'd want to go in there and download everything from your repository. And then after that, on July 15th again, you can actually do your full application. SBA will begin issuing decisions on that, on those applications on October 15th, and that's when the full certification program takes effect. So I hope that's not too muddy, but we're going through some big changes on that front, but it's a good program. Service disabled veteran-owned small business is also a little bit complicated, only because we also have the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is a little bit different. So for all federal agencies, you're going to self-certify your SDVOSB status on SAM.gov. If you're going to do business with the Department of Veterans Affairs, then you are going to get verified at vetbiz.gov, which is separate from what we do at SBA. Basic eligibility, same as before. Small business, 51% ownership and control. The key things in here on this slide again is you're going to self-certify in SAM, or you can respond to one of those prime contractors in writing self-certifying, and that's good enough for them as well. But if you're talking about contracts with the VA, then you're going to go through their vet verification program at vetbiz.gov. Good news about that is the verification that they produce is also recognized by the state of Minnesota. So you maybe heard about it at the last event or the upcoming event about doing business with the state. Benefits of the program, of course, access to set-asides and sole source contracts. If you go through the VA program, there's the added benefit that the VA has to do business with a service disabled veteran-owned small business first, unless there are none that can perform the work. If there aren't any, then they can do business with a veteran-owned small business, not service disabled. If there's no veteran-owned small business, then they can open it up to all the other different categories, the woman-owned and SDB or 8A. So as a veteran-owned small business, doing business with the VA gives you a pretty good advantage. So finally, we're going to talk briefly about the Mentor Protege program, because it does pop up a fair amount. Right now, there are currently 2 Mentor Protege programs. There's the 8A program, which was built for that 8A business development program. And then in the last 5 years or so, they created the All Small Mentor Protege program. And what that means is it's open to all small businesses, depending on whatever category you might fit into. The general purpose is to basically provide business development assistance to the small businesses, whether that's in the 8A program or in the All Small program. So you're, as the protege, as the small business protege in this program, you're looking to a mentor to help enhance your capabilities or help you meet your business plan goals, or basically help you successfully compete for contracts. One thing that's encouraged, or one thing to note here, is that mentors are encouraged to provide assistance to proteges in performing, this says non-8A contracts, but basically any small business contract, in order to help develop your capabilities. So it's an important aspect of the program. So what this means is when you're in this program, you're going to identify goals that you have as a small business that mentor is going to help you reach. These are business development goals. And it could be technical or management assistance. Let's say you need help with bookkeeping or accounting. They're going to help you build those programs, or you'll come up with a plan to do that. It could be financial assistance. Maybe you need the working capital to get through some of your projects. It could be a subcontracting relationship, either you to them or them to you. But you can also perform prime contracts with a joint venture between the two of you. Eligibility and application information can be found at these sites. If you want to talk about these programs anytime down the road, or you've identified a mentor, or maybe a large business has come up to you and say, hey, do you want to team up in a mentor protege program? The first thing I would do is talk to PTAC or talk to me about what you're getting into. Know what the rules are, know the situation. You want to just make sure you're going to it fully informed, and that you're going to get something out of it, and it's not just a means for a large business to go after restricted contracts. Once you're in a mentor protege agreement, we do an annual review of the program to make sure you're getting the training, you're getting the business development assistance that you need, and that you still meet the terms of the agreement. We will cancel it if we have to, if we see that the mentor is not providing any of the assistance that's identified. So that's the last of what I have on the certification programs. The things I want you to remember is go to certify.sba.gov, take the MI eligible assessment, the questionnaire thing, and figure out what's a good fit for you, and then talk to me or talk to PTAC about what your next steps might be. There's also instructions on that Certify webpage, but if you have questions, talk to us. I also just wanted to quickly go over some stuff that Bob mentioned, just to reiterate it. SAM, again, all government contractors have to be in the system for award management. Make sure you know what your NAICS code is and your size standards. Make sure you have a login.gov account so you can access SAM. Just kind of follow the instructions. SAM also has a user guide that is very helpful for going through the process. But more importantly, PTAC is a really good partner on this stuff. It's what they're paid for. They've seen it all. So, keep them close. Additionally, these are just some contracting assistance sites. There's the SBA site, tabs on federal contracting. Our Learning Center has a lot of online webinars that you can take. And then we have some local assistance information. Here's the Minnesota PTAC's webpage. We also have, SBA has SCORE and the Small Business Development Centers that can help you with other either mentoring or business development needs as well. Those are typically free of cost as well. My contact information is right here, so I'll leave that up there for a little bit. Reach out, and if there's anything I can do for you, I absolutely will. I don't always have the answers, but I usually know somebody who does. And that is just about it.
Perfect, Sean. Thank you. You kept your pace really well throughout the presentation. Nice. I think we have, it's perfect. The timing is perfect. We have several questions though, and I will let Anita jump in and present those questions so you can address them, and Bob too. Bob can jump into and address any of those. Thank you very much, Sean.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we have our first question from Rodrigo. Is the government working with wholesalers or only producers and companies that manufacture or provide services?
I should lean on Bob for that one. As the contracting officer, with his history, he's going to have a better answer. But they do work with manufacturers. But if you're not a manufacturer, if you're a wholesaler or a distributor, there is what's called a non-manufacturer clause or non-manufacturer waivers, where they can work with resellers that are not the original producer. And that's going to be within certain industries. And again, that's a question. If you are in that situation, connect with PTAC and sit down with them and go through the process of where your opportunities are. Are you back with us, Bob?
Yeah, I am. I think that the part of the process is going to have to go through and look at some of the spend data, some of the forecasts, and narrow it down as to who likely might have a need for that particular type of a product or service. What comes to mind right off the top of my head without even researching that is like military commissaries and on military bases, for example. And there again, is it going to be the government that's going to be doing it, or would it be perhaps looking for somebody to run, operate, and manage a cafeteria or one of those commissaries, for example? But I think the thing to keep in mind is you really need to have, as a business owner, a strategic or a business plan, but really a strategic plan, and try to really have a clear focus as to what you're looking to try to accomplish business-wise. And with that being the case, is to look at all the tools that are available for you and determining whether federal, state, or local government, what makes sense to you today, and start working on putting together what I call the roadmap, and working within your capacity by exploring all the options, not just federal government options, all the options, and bidding on opportunities that make sense today, but planning for the next phase of business growth. Will the federal government or the Defense Department have a need for that particular service? I can't say off the top of my head. I'd have to do some research, but I can tell you from my experiences is that typically somewhere in the government, federal, state, or local, they have a need for almost everything.
Okay, thank you. Rodrigo, hopefully that answered your question. If not, definitely contact us in the chat, or Sean's information is also in the chat. Our next question is from Miguel. Miguel owns 2 staffing agencies. One is for food and the other is cleaners and housekeepers. He wants to know if there's any opportunities in those areas.
I would say certainly on the cleaner front, there are a lot of federal properties, and quite frankly, for local and state government as well, there's a lot of properties that need cleaning. Particularly right now, as federal employees are getting ready to go back to work, there's additional cleaning opportunities that are popping up for sanitizing buildings, for example. So that's definitely one to look at, to make sure you have the capacity to take on some of the buildings. They tend to be a longer term contract, usually a 1-year contract with 4 option years. So one thing you can do, and I think Bob will probably talk about this too, is you can do some research to find out who is holding those contracts now, when they've been issued, and when they expire. Find out when they expire. You can start marketing your services to that contracting office, and be prepared to put in a bid, a competitive bid on the project.
I might add, I'm sorry, I apologize.
I was just going to say, on the catering front, that's a little tricky, especially right now with no real large meetings or events or things like that. It's a little bit tricky at the moment, I would assume. So go ahead, Bob.
With regard to the catering event, a lot of the first answer I gave to that initial question could come into play, but catering and items like that, when things are operating normal and we're not dealing with COVID and some of the quarantine restrictions that are going on, often you'll find whether state, city, county, even federal government may have a need for catering services during meetings and different types of events, whether they're paid with federal money or whether or not they collect the money from the participants, the need is still there. With regard to services like janitorial, snow plowing, lawn services, or anything that's building related, there definitely is need. The GSA Public Building Service, along with individual agencies, the process will help reveal certain target market. But the one thing I would want to keep in mind, or recommend that you keep in mind, is HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development, has what they call their Section 3 program. And they have that for businesses as well. And locally, the city of St. Paul administers a Section 3 program for businesses. I know Minneapolis does as well. That expands out to about a 15-county area. And it provides some additional opportunities. There are certain requirements, like what you've heard with HubZone and others, that you have to satisfy and comply with on there. Again, we can counsel you through that, but oftentimes that can lead through opportunities through like Minneapolis public housing, and like I said, St. Paul, Minneapolis, in addition to some federal government ones that are HUD backed. So the quick answer is yes, but the overall answer that pertains to most all things doing government is it depends. It depends. Depends on the situation.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Can you hear me? This is John.
Hi, John.
Hi there. Well, I just wanted to notice that we're starting to wrap up now. Is there any other questions? So we can kind of keep things.
We just have one more question. We've got 10 minutes left in the webinar. We have one more question, and that is from James. He wants to know if his business is owned 100% by 100% Latino, 50% vet and disabled vet, do you submit multiple bids under the different categories, or do you have to pick your status?
I could take that initially. First of all, with regard to picking status for set-asides, that's up to the contracting officer. And the contracting officer, particularly in the federal government, has a lot of discretion in source selection versus that of state and local government, as well as the commercial marketplace. On the issue with regard to the number of proposals, there's only one solicitation. There's only one bid requirement. With regard to qualifying for any of the certification programs, the self-certification in the federal government, of course, is based on the criteria that Sean went over with regard to ownership control, at least at 51% or more. There's other criteria that Sean had mentioned, but we would have to go through to make sure that you qualify for it. But again, in the federal government, it's self-certification in SAM. The 50-50 status for veteran, that alone wouldn't necessarily qualify for either one, just because it is a 51% or more or majority ownership. Sean, did I mess that up, or is there anything I missed on there?
No, that makes perfect sense. The 50% is an issue. I always tell a story of before I was working for SBA, I was starting a solar company with a friend of mine. I am a veteran, and he is an Alaskan native, and we were 50-50 owners, and that was our plan going forward. And we learned about this at the Sadbach Fair, and we couldn't make up our minds on how to deal with that ownership split. So we ended up going different directions. I work for SBA now, and he does something different. So that 51% is important. So work with PTAC on that issue to ensure that you are the person, the 51% owner that has the final say on decisions. You can't be overruled, those kind of situations. And then the other thing I'll say is, if you fit multiple categories, if you are a service disabled veteran woman minority, and you have gone through all these processes, that means a set aside in any of those categories is open to you. It doesn't mean that you get multiple advantages in every, or in that one set aside, but if there's a woman-owned set aside, you can go after it. If there's service disabled, you can go after it, et cetera, if that makes sense. And the way that is decided, like Bob mentioned earlier, is a contracting officer is going to do some market research and find out who is interested in bidding on a contract. So they'll put out a notice and say, we're looking for this. And if they get enough women-owned small businesses or enough veteran-owned small businesses, then they'll be able to set aside within that category. So it's important to watch for that kind of information. I don't know if I muddied the waters there.
Okay, thank you. That's all of our questions. Oh, we got one more from Liz. Can the 51% ownership switch out every year? So 1 year, one partner makes the final decisions, and the next year it's the other partner. So that'll be our last question, and then John Pacheco can wrap it up.
Yikes, that's a tough one, Bob.
When it comes
to me, what's your business type, and then how is your ownership set up? That's interesting. I've never come across that question before.
I think from my initial reaction, without knowing the specifics, there's so many different variables on here, but part of the certification process when you're going through certifications is you're looking at a lot of information through an application, but you're also looking at governance documents and stockholder agreements and a number of different types of things that shows and clearly demonstrates majority control, highest paid salary members in some instances here, or most instances, decisions as far as hiring and firing or whatever it is, the major decisions. And that's based on documents. And once those documents are submitted and reviewed, and believe me, a lot of them are challenged on there, but if it gets through the approval process, that's what it's pretty much based on. So how you operate a business and who makes those decisions is something that you're going to have to put your best foot forward and include in your application supporting documentation at the time you're pursuing certifications, with the exception of self-certification, unless that information is asked for at that by a contracting officer or the SBA or somebody else of interest. Yeah, or a protest.
In additionally, I'd say if you were changing that, that's essentially a change in ownership. And so that would require a recertification in any case, which can be a long process.
Yep. It's a lot of work involved with them because they do get into a lot of detail, but a lot of that is really for your protection to avoid the pass-throughs. I've been out on some of these myself where companies have been trying to justify as a woman-owned small business only to have the male true owner of the company shouting out the answers to some of my questions just from the other room. You knew darn well that they knew that there was opportunity available by being certified in this instance as a woman-owned small business. And they were trying to see what they could get away with, in my opinion. And they're very thorough. Those applications, they don't make them simple. They ask for a lot of information to make sure that the appropriate I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But again, they're for your advantage, and we want you to qualify for all that you can so that you can take advantage of those benefits.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you, Sean and Bob. And now we'll turn it over to our president of the Latino Chamber, John Pacheco, and our executive director, Fabio Tenorio.
Anita, can I say one quick thing before John and Fabio say something? I see James had mentioned something in chat that they need to create multiple LLCs. One thing to think about there is then they're going to be considered affiliated, and that pops up in the rules too. So talk to PTAC about that before you do anything.
Okay, is John available? If not, I can just mention thank you both, Sean and Bob, and for the the people that were participating on the seminar, we will be posting a recording of the webinar on our website, on the website, and then also we will be sending copies of the presentation that with all the information that we covered today in a later email. So with that, John is available.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, John.
All right. Again, I want to repeat what Fabio said here. I want to thank the folks from the small business, or Sean from Small Business Administration, but also more importantly, the folks from the PTAC here. That oh, I can share my video. Actually, it's been great working with them. I think that we've finished the 3 series. As mentioned before, they will be on our website. They will be on as soon as we finish this one here. And it's www.latinochambermn.com. And again, I mean, we know we've provided a lot of information. Having it on the website will allow you to go back to it, refresh yourself, or learn some more things every day. And so I like the fact that we have this available. We are looking at possibly translated to Spanish, and so for folks who need this information as well. And so that'll be coming up, and we'll email folks that have participated in the past to ensure that you're aware of what we're doing. So with that, I'd like to close.